Hello, good morning, everyone, and good morning, Andy. How are you doing today? What is almost the last day of the first week of the climate conference COP26?
It's gone incredibly quickly, hasn't it? And so much has been happening. And I've been just excited to see how much is happening at Salford University, because every day something new comes onto the horizon. We see a range of things taking place that I didn't even know were going on. And across the news coverage as well from many of our staff has been fantastic, because so many people are working out in the field, doing work that's really pertinent to what's happening in Glasgow. And it's also great to see a number of our staff in Glasgow just getting involved with things as it happens, both attending protests, but also just working behind the scenes on the programme. So yeah, lots been going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And next week we will actually be joined by one person who is at COP from the University of Salford. And yesterday was quite a breakthrough day at COP. What it could have possibly resulted in some breakthrough deals, possibly the most important from the COP, as we had 20 countries agreeing to end financing for fossil fuels and 40 countries committing to moving away from fuel. We'll see ultimately how successful these commitments are, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. And the experts are saying that this wouldn't be possible a few years ago. So I am definitely full of hope. And I think the hope is appropriate, as today we are speaking about the youth action and public empowerment.
That's right. So we have a series of Instagram lives on the University of Salford channel across the entire day. And it's really exciting because we have so many different students that work across climate change in so many different ways. And I think what COP26 has really done for the university is bring together those different perspectives to understand how much of our research across a whole range of disciplines is pertinent to and very much focused on climate awareness, climate action, and hopefully addressing the impacts of climate change. And we have a wonderful guest joining us today who is I've worked with Mike Wood, I think since almost day one at University of Salford, and was very fortunate enough to be out in Chernobyl with him, gosh, what feels like a very long time ago now, but I think about 6 years. And Mike had his inaugural lecture last night, which I gather you saw.
Yes, it was absolutely incredible. I was so happy to be able to join online, and I'm so excited to see Mike with us, joining us today for the live. I'm incredibly excited. I'm a fan, really.
Well, let's bring him in and say good morning. Hello, Mike. Good to see
Hello.
you.
Morning, guys, and thank you for that build-up there, Marta. I hope that I don't disappoint.
Oh no, absolutely not. It was great, and it was very interesting to see the myths being busted, because that was the title of the session, and it was particularly interesting for me because I am actually from Eastern Europe, and I grew up around all of these misconceptions that you talked about, even though we are closer to the zone than the UK. So that was quite interesting, and I think this is sort of the core thing that we need to talk about, the communication that you mentioned so many times yesterday, because when I was growing up, I heard a lot about, the mutant vegetables and fruit. We would say like, oh, this one looks like it's from Chernobyl. I think one of your main roles is communicating your findings to the public, and I think this is more important than ever, so that people can follow what's happening at COP26. What is your perspective on what sort of works in communicating science to the public, and what would you say to, for example, young or aspiring climate scientists who want to make sure that their findings are conveyed across to everyone?
Yeah, and my journey into science communication has undoubtedly definitely been spurred on by Andy over the years, and since we started working together, as he said, as he first arrived at Salford. I already realized quite a long time ago that one of the key things to do is actually just talk to people as normal people. Don't try and approach them with lots of facts and figures delivered in a way that makes sense to somebody from your discipline area or from your area of specialism, and hope that they will understand it. Obviously I work on radioactivity, radiation. If I start talking to people about micrograys per hour, sieverts of dose, if I start talking to them about becquerels and all these other weird sounding units, they look at me like I'm insane. Yes, okay, people from my particular discipline area know what I'm talking about, but the normal person out in the street who wants to understand more about radiation is not going to be helped by this. So actually giving them the opportunity to have an open, normal dialogue in a language that makes sense to them, doing things like we developed Virtual Chernobyl. It's been a great way of getting people to actually not just hear me say what the place is like and what the places are like that I work in, but getting them to see it for themselves. So I think it's, talk in a common language and use tools that people wish to engage with to help them understand the reality versus some of the myths that surround Chernobyl, in my case, climate change, whatever it may be that people are trying to communicate moving forward.
And do you think that things have got better? Have we got better at science communication? Are people more clued into the facts better? Because we hear a lot, of course, about misinformation as well. I mean, how do you see it? 'Cause the media sphere's changed so much over the last decade.
So I think that things have changed a lot. I think that scientists have become increasingly aware of the importance of science communication. But I think it's also crucial for us to recognize that not everybody is cut out for science communication. I think each individual scientist needs to identify what they feel comfortable with and what sort of space they feel happy working in. There will be some that feel much more comfortable at the pure hard end of science, doing the research, producing the findings, but there then need to be others that are willing to take that up and help them translate that science into something that's then accessible for the wider community. I really enjoy bridging the gap between the two. That's a space that I feel happy in, but I don't expect every person to feel like that. Anybody that thinks they would feel like that, though, and would like to bridge the gap, I'd encourage them to seek out people like Andy, anybody else that's involved with science communication, and try and get some hints, tips to help them along their way, because it's a really rewarding experience. And I love talking to the general public about science and about the work that I do.
That's great. And I think that's really important, especially right now, so that we can make informed decision and follow what's happening on the COP26 conference. I believe you must have been following it yourself. What are your thoughts on what's been happening so far, especially in relation to yesterday's commitments on energy?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's fantastic to hear the energy commitments coming through, and sort of the pushing away of fossil fuels so broadly is a really important step forward. Clearly we'd like to see the speed of many of these changes accelerated, and this is always going to be a concern. How quickly can we do something versus what time window have we got to act to be able to do this? I know, obviously last night I was talking about Chernobyl and a very significant nuclear accident. That generally is something that if you ask people in the wider world, is nuclear safe, they'll think towards the accidents, and that panic will set in, and they'll think, oh no, you couldn't possibly have that as your energy mix. The reality is that until we've got sufficient renewables with a capacity to meet the huge energy demands that we have currently, or until we can encourage people to somehow drive down their energy demands so that renewables then start to balance out appropriately, countries like the UK and many others are going to be looking towards nuclear as part of their energy mix. They're doing this because nuclear is a much lower carbon emitter when compared to things like coal-fired power stations. This gradual shift away from fossil fuels through to renewables needs something to help bridge that gap, and that's where nuclear can really play a role. And what I would say to anybody that is really concerned about the idea of having new nuclear facilities constructed is that don't base your opinions on accidents of the past. Something like the Chernobyl accident happened because it was a very outdated, as it is now, nuclear reactor design, and the safety culture within the nuclear industry at that time in the former Soviet Union just wasn't there. Fast forward to today, reactor designs that we have now have been informed by errors of the past and some amazing science that has since gone on. And also, there has been a dramatic change internationally in terms of the safety culture approach. So actually, if I was asked where I prefer to live, would I prefer to live to a fossil fuel power station or prefer to live next to a nuclear power station, I'd feel much more comfortable with the nuclear power station because I know the chances of anything going wrong are extremely low, and the health implications of living next to one versus the other are hugely different. The amount of air pollution that comes out of a coal-fired power station, at the very least, is not something that you want to be exposed to for extended periods if you can help it. So I think it really is important for people to understand this difference between what they've got perhaps as a perception in their mind versus the reality.
That's really interesting. And do you, when you look across perhaps Europe or even the world, does public opinion vary considerably about nuclear energy? Is it something that has different senses of concern in one place or another?
I think to an extent it does, but actually there are common concerns that you find for many. Even if you talk to people in France, where there are huge numbers of nuclear power stations, there are still many members of the public that have real concerns about nuclear. So I don't think it necessarily is a dramatic shift that I see going from country to country in terms of general public perception currently. I think that what we need to do is try and work at this as a multi-country kind of communication activity. We've got to try and make sure that everybody understands this difference between myth and reality within this context.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sorry, I had a technical glitch. Absolutely. I think, we keep coming back to the communication. And I think a big role in here is played by young people and the youth voice that we can see all around COP. And what is your opinion on what the youth voice could do in this space? What could be the role in communicating the science to their generation, but also to people who are older and who are listening to the youth voices?
The youth voice is something that I've been really keen to engage with for many years now. So a number of years ago, I and a couple of colleagues developed a science stage show that we were able to take to different locations around the UK, to theatres around the UK, invite schools into, and actually do a sort of fun, interactive, live experiments on stage type science stage show that allowed them to understand more about radiation and the nuclear energy production that they may have heard about. The idea of this was to inspire younger generations to get into STEM, to try and move forward into science-based careers in the future. But it was also to try and make sure that they understood some of the reality that perhaps their parents didn't. Because something that we found is that you educate the younger generation, they go back, they have conversations with their parents, and gradually they help to change the mindsets of their parents from this sort of myth type zone through to a reality. And this is a technique that I've used, for example, out in Ukraine around the Chernobyl exclusion zone. I've been into schools and worked with Ukrainian school children in areas very close to the exclusion zone who have all of exactly the same misconceptions about radiation that I would encounter if I went into a school in the UK. So just proximity to a site like Chernobyl hasn't actually changed the way in which the popularized culture and the media have influenced these younger generations. So for scientists, actually going and talking to the younger generations directly and getting them on board, getting them infused is great, because once they're infused, they are able to then start to act as ambassadors themselves for that reality the scientific reality. I've also done this in talks in Fukushima as well, trying to encourage people involved with communication around the Fukushima accident to make sure they're communicating clearly through to the school kids. Because again, there are many parents, elderly relatives who live within the Fukushima prefecture area, are aware that a nuclear accident has taken place in their area, and they've got no understanding of what the implications are for them. You know, you get people just concerned over things like whether they can eat a peach from their back garden. All of those sorts of things need to be addressed, and the youth voice is so important within that.
I think that's really important. I think one of the things that strikes me is that we often talk about empowering young people, and I'm sort of mindful of the fact that sort of Greta Thunberg began with these Fridays for Futures rather, and that was obviously a very sort of radical approach to things, striking from school on a Friday in protest of what the government aren't doing. And it's sort of the gap between, I guess, what we need to happen and what young people are doing is whether, in fact, the curriculum is adequately structured to deliver on some of these important issues. I'm mindful also yesterday that we saw the announcement of this Climate Leaders Award for young people, which will, a bit like a Duke of Edinburgh Award in the UK, allow them to take action towards climate change and obviously hopefully get them to be more active in a variety of ways. But do you think that we've gone far enough in education to bring these issues into the curriculum, or do you think there needs to be a more radical transformation?
I think there's definitely progress within curriculum that's been taking place, and certainly, you know, my own kids, my elder daughter, she's now in year 8 of high school, and I've been seeing the different curriculum books coming through, the knowledge organisers that they're getting on different topics, and you can see, you know, some of these important issues being brought to the fore. Something that I would encourage all schools to consider, though, is whether it's worth also trying to get people from the higher education world and other areas into schools more to actually talk directly. So it's one thing, a teacher standing up in front of their class, you know, even like me standing in front of my own class of students and speaking to them about something, versus me getting in somebody who works specifically in that area, specifically on that topic, to come and talk to them directly, because suddenly the kids feel empowered to ask the questions that are eating away at their minds. You know, we can't imagine easily how that child's own mind is working and how the different bits of information that they've got currently have been pieced together. You know, some will have come from what they've learned in school, some will have come from a computer game that they've played, some will have come from something that they've seen on social media, some will have come from what a friend has said to them, and it's all pieced together in a particular way. And each individual child will have particular questions that they need the answer to be able to assemble those pieces in a way that works for them. And that's why I think it's really important that schools embrace the idea of not just doing the teacher teaches students, but also the teacher encourages people from outside to come and also share their experiences with students. And hopefully those kinds of changes in the curriculum we will start to see more and more of moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. That's very important. And in terms of the teaching methods, I actually wanted to touch on a little bit on technology. Yesterday, you did mention a little bit of how technology helped you reach young people, particularly during the lockdowns due to the pandemic. Could you talk a little bit about the importance of technology in science communications in your experience?
Well, and I think one of the key things that we've got to think about whenever we think about communicating with anybody is what is it that they like to interact with. And, you know, some people like to interact with technology, and certainly the younger generations generally really like to interact with technology. I think that my older daughter actually has her phone almost integrated into her hand now. I'm not sure that it actually is no longer a part of her. So, you know, she's communicating very regularly with people in the wider world. She's constantly got this information stream coming through to her. So what we need to do is we need to understand which are the particular platforms, the particular types of technology that work for the different generations, and try and make sure that we're able to get the right information through to them. You know, one of the problems that you see so often is, yes, they've got access to this, you know, window through to the world, this great stream of information coming through, but so often, unfortunately, there are many misconceptions, myths, bits of fake news coming through those particular streams. What I've certainly found doing things like science festivals is, virtual reality headsets work so well. They're such a good way of getting people to just move their headspace. For me to take somebody to Chernobyl when they're sitting in Salford, that's almost mind-blowing. And it's a fantastic advancement that's come through as a result of technology. For me, when I'm teaching my own students, actually having the opportunity to do virtual field trips with them, and particularly over that period that we've had with the restrictions on travel during the pandemic, not being able to get students out to places, but then suddenly put them in a VR headset type situation for a virtual reality field trip, or even take them into a projection chamber that we've got at the University of Salford, be able to project the imagery from different locations into there and have the same sorts of conversations that you would have with them if you were out in the field. How would you go about undertaking a sampling program of this area? What are the key features that you see in this environment that may be influencing the ecology of this environment? These kinds of questions you can explore as a result of having the technologies to support these aspects of learning. And it's really powerful.
And your lecture last night was also incredibly powerful, Mike. I've seen so many reactions online to it that have been incredibly positive. So thank you very much for joining us for this morning's live around COP26, and good luck for the rest of your work over this coming year. And we hope to see you again soon. And good to see you, Marta.
Thank you.
Sure.
See you
Thank you very
later.
much, guys. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.